Optimized final script. 20 push-ups. That's all she could manage. The drill sergeant's laughter echoed across the training ground as recruits snickered behind her. "Ma'am, maybe you should try yoga instead," he mocked. But when she quietly rolled up her sleeve and revealed what was tattooed there, the entire platoon went silent. Because some heroes don't announce themselves. They just show up. Don't forget to subscribe and tell us in the comments which country, which city you're watching from today. The morning air at Camp Pendleton carried the salt-tinged breeze from the California coast as Elena stepped through the doors of the military fitness facility at 5:30 a.m. The gymnasium buzzed with fluorescent lights casting shadows across exercise equipment and motivational Marine Corps posters. Elena appeared completely unremarkable. Mid-30s, medium build, brown hair in a practical ponytail, wearing a gray sweatshirt and white running shoes. No military insignia, no rank indicators, just a simple gym bag and water bottle. As she found an empty corner, her movements seemed casual, but were actually trained observation patterns that none of the watching Marines recognized. Staff Sergeant Marcus Donovan had spent 20 years categorizing every person who walked through his doors, and Elena registered immediately as what he privately called a military tourist. Civilians seeking authentic military experience, usually inspired by Hollywood movies or social media posts. When asked for identification, she provided only her first name, which violated military protocol demanding full rank and unit information. This casual dismissal of military customs suggested either ignorance or disrespect for traditions that governed military culture. Among the 15 participants were Kyle Martinez, 22, and fresh from boot camp, carrying the eager intensity of someone desperately hungry to prove himself worthy of the Marine Corps title. Jake Williams, a 30-year-old corporal with 2 combat deployments, moved with quiet confidence that came from being tested under fire. Both men noticed Elena immediately. The military mind cataloged every variable, and a civilian woman represented an unknown factor requiring assessment. When Donovan announced the fitness test protocol, his voice carried 2 decades of authority. Male standards regardless of gender, no exceptions. 2 minutes for minimum 20 push-ups, followed by sit-ups and a 3-mile run. Elena positioned herself with movements that appeared unremarkable, but demonstrated familiarity with military exercise protocols. Her hand placement was precise, body alignment perfect, breathing controlled. For someone supposedly civilian, she seemed surprisingly comfortable with formal military testing procedures. The first push-up was slow but controlled, executed with attention to detail, suggesting formal training. The second showed strain, a slight tremor becoming more pronounced with each repetition. By the third, visible shaking appeared, sweat forming despite cool morning air. The fourth took noticeably longer, breathing shifting from controlled to labored gasps. Kyle and Jake exchanged glances, recognizing someone whose capabilities were being pushed beyond limits far too early in what should have been a basic exercise. Donovan's commentary began clinical, but quickly shifted to mockery as Elena's performance deteriorated. Her 5th push-up barely qualified as legitimate repetition. The 6th saw her collapse momentarily before struggling back to position. By the 7th, form had completely broken down. Watching Marines began shifting uncomfortably, some suppressing snickers at the spectacular failure unfolding before them. Through repetitions 8 through 15, Elena's struggle became painful to watch. Arms shaking uncontrollably, breathing ragged, sweat streaming despite minimal elapsed time. Each push-up took progressively longer as her body fought against demands being placed upon it. Her determination was evident in her refusal to quit despite obvious futility. But determination alone couldn't bridge the gap between current capabilities and minimum military standards. Commentary from participants grew audible as Elena's performance made clear she wouldn't achieve acceptable scores. Kyle made pointed observations about apparent lack of preparation. Jake, with combat wisdom, was more circumspect, but clearly unimpressed. Both men maintained extremely high fitness standards throughout their careers. Elena's struggle seemed like mockery of standards they'd worked so hard to achieve. By push-up 17, Elena collapsed completely, rested several seconds, then struggled back to position. The 18th was more partial movement than complete repetition. By 19, she used momentum rather than muscle strength. When time expired, Donovan's stopwatch showed 19 push-ups, exactly one short of minimum standard. Heavy silence filled with unspoken judgment as Elena remained on the mat, breathing heavily. To watching Marines, 19 push-ups represented more than failed score. It was fundamental misunderstanding of military fitness. In their world, physical readiness meant life-or-death preparedness that could mean the difference between coming home alive or in a flag-draped coffin. Donovan's assessment was brutal and public. He suggested Elena try Pilates, yoga, or water aerobics, civilian pursuits not requiring military-level capability. His tone carried weight of someone who'd spent decades watching unprepared civilians attempt insertion into military environments where failure could endanger actual service members. Jake added that male and female standards existed for good reason. Attempting to apply military fitness across gender lines was unrealistic and dangerous. Elena's response was noteworthy for complete lack of defensiveness. She sat quietly, wiping sweat and taking measured sips, while commentary continued around her. When Kyle suggested civilian women shouldn't attempt military fitness tests at all, Elena showed no visible reaction to the pointed insult. She continued methodical cooling down, appearing like someone who'd expected exactly this outcome. When Elena quietly stated 20 push-ups wasn't that difficult, the comment struck Marines as disconnected from witnessed reality. Donovan's response was immediate and sharp. Evidence of her capabilities was literally on the mat in her failed score. Elena's follow-up that she was working on endurance rather than form only deepened the sense she was either lying to save face or genuinely didn't understand what she'd failed to accomplish. The conversation took an unexpected turn when Kyle noticed something during Elena's cool-down routine. As she wiped down her arms, her gray sweatshirt shifted slightly, revealing what appeared to be a tattoo edge on her left upper arm. In military culture, tattoos often marked service, unit affiliation, or significant experiences. Kyle's question about its existence seemed innocent small talk among fitness participants. Elena confirmed she had a tattoo, but provided no additional details. This reticence increased curiosity among Marines accustomed to military tattoos that told stories of service and achievement. Jake pressed for more information about the design or meaning. Elena's hesitation was barely perceptible, but something shifted in her demeanor from passive acceptance of criticism to something approaching wariness. What happened next would be remembered by everyone present as the moment everything they thought they knew about Elena Kavak was revealed completely wrong. With slow, deliberate movement suggesting conscious decision rather than casual response, Elena grasped her sweatshirt hem and lifted it steadily upward, past her elbow, past her bicep, until the entire upper arm was visible. 15 people simultaneously drew breath, creating a whisper of shock echoing off walls. The tattoo revealed was not amateur artwork many military personnel sported, nor common designs marking ordinary service. Elena's upper arm bore the Congressional Medal of Honor rendered in stunning detail. The distinctive blue ribbon adorned with white stars immediately recognizable to anyone with military knowledge. Below the image, in small but readable script, was a date making the tattoo's significance unmistakable. Afghanistan, 15th of March, 2019. The silence was so complete that humming overhead lights seemed unnaturally loud. Donovan's face went through rapid expressions: confusion, recognition, disbelief, finally horrified understanding of what he'd spent an hour doing. Kyle swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the tattoo as if unable to process what he was seeing. Jake's face went completely pale as implications became clear. The Congressional Medal of Honor was America's highest military decoration, reserved for extraordinary heroism in combat where death risk was probable. Fewer than 3,500 individuals had received it in American military history, fewer than a dozen women among them. Elena was one of those dozen, having earned America's highest honor for actions in Afghanistan on March 15, 2019. Elena lowered her sweatshirt with deliberate care, something different in her eyes now, a hardness speaking to experiences none of the watching Marines could imagine. When she asked whether they could proceed with sit-ups, her voice carried different weight. This wasn't someone seeking permission, but someone accustomed to command. The gymnasium's transformation was immediate and profound. Where mockery had existed moments before, now heavy silence filled with respect, curiosity, and fear. Medal of Honor recipients were living legends whose combat actions were studied in military academies. To have mocked such a person bordered on sacrilege. Elena's background emerged in fragments. Former Army captain, elite Rangers unit specializing in special operations. Her retired status explained civilian appearance and presence in general fitness rather than active duty facility. But these facts only deepened the mystery of what she'd done in Afghanistan and why someone with her background struggled with basic push-ups. The story Elena began to tell painted a picture of modern combat that was both inspiring and terrifying. Forward Operating Base Chapman had been hit by coordinated Taliban assault on March 15, 2019. An attack planned for weeks and executed with precision that caught American forces off guard. Initial assault began at 3:30 a.m. with mortar barrage destroying communications and blocking escape routes. Within 30 minutes, 22 Americans were trapped in the main compound, cut off from reinforcement. Elena's observation post was 300 meters from the main compound, concealed from attacking Taliban forces. This positioning left her with terrible choice: remain safe and wait for reinforcements estimated 4 hours away, or abandon security and attempt rescue in a tactically suicidal mission. Elena chose to leave her position and single-handedly assault a numerically superior enemy force. Armed only with M4 carbine, 6 magazines, 2 grenades, and first aid kit, Elena began a 13-hour continuous combat operation, resulting in 37 enemy deaths and successful rescue of all 22 trapped Americans. Her initial strategy disrupted Taliban command structure by targeting leadership positions. Moving through pre-dawn darkness with Ranger stealth, she infiltrated enemy perimeter and eliminated 3 commanders with combat knife, creating confusion and disrupting their coordinated assault. For 2 hours, Elena employed hit-and-run tactics, striking isolated positions, then disappearing before Taliban could organize response. Her destruction of a mortar position eliminated 6 fighters and reduced immediate threat to the compound. However, Taliban forces adapted quickly. By dawn, they recognized a single individual was conducting systematic attacks and shifted to defensive posture, designed to hunt Elena down. Elena's tactics changed to precision shooting from concealed positions, forcing enemies to take cover and disrupting their siege capability. Over 4 hours, she eliminated 11 fighters through careful marksmanship. Despite success reducing enemy numbers, Taliban reinforcements arriving late morning restored their assault capability, forcing Elena into the most difficult decision of an operation already requiring repeated life-risking. The direct assault Elena launched against 13 entrenched Taliban fighters represented tactical impossibility that shouldn't have succeeded. Enemy fighters were positioned defensively with overlapping fire and superior numbers. Elena's approach demonstrated innovative thinking, separating exceptional soldiers from merely competent ones. Using smoke grenades for concealment and flanking through partially destroyed buildings, Elena reached compound perimeter undetected. Close-quarters combat through corridors was brutal, involving firearms, combat knives, and improvised weapons when ammunition ran low. Elena's successful assault cost her multiple gunshot wounds, shrapnel damage, severe concussion, broken ribs, and internal bleeding requiring immediate surgery. She remained conscious and combat effective throughout 13 hours while sustaining these injuries. All 22 soldiers were rescued. Medical consequences were severe and long-lasting. 8 months of physical therapy focused on rebuilding capabilities damaged by trauma. Permanent nerve damage reduced grip strength and motor control. Reduced lung capacity affected cardiovascular endurance. Chronic pain was constant reminder of service price. Elena's current civilian fitness program resulted from medical necessity. Her military career was over due to permanent limitations. The modest goal of 30 push-ups by Christmas represented significant challenge given current capabilities. Donovan's embarrassment at earlier comments was evident in repeated apology attempts, but Elena's response demonstrated grace under pressure. She insisted no apology was necessary. Donovan had been maintaining standards, and Medal of Honor didn't excuse fitness test failure. This revealed character going beyond combat heroics to military service values. Her insistence that standards remained standards regardless of circumstances demonstrated integrity, both inspiring and humbling. Elena's impromptu training session provided insights into combat tactics and psychological preparation going beyond standard fitness programs. Her emphasis on mental toughness as developable skill offered practical guidance for young Marines facing their own tests. Techniques for maintaining focus during extended combat, including gratitude as mental clarity tool, provided accessible warrior psychology perspectives. Elena's discussion of failure and character development resonated strongly because it addressed fundamental military challenges. Maintaining confidence facing setbacks. Her framework viewing failure as data rather than judgment provided practical self-improvement approach. Her fitness journey example, from unable to complete single push-up during recovery to current 19 repetitions, illustrated consistent effort power over time. Training modifications. Elena demonstrated for accommodating injuries revealed adaptive fitness knowledge, impressing experienced Marines. Her ability maintaining intensity while adjusting methods for physical constraints showed how military fitness principles applied even when circumstances were challenging. Mental approach emphasizing gratitude and mission focus over pain provided practical motivation framework. As the session concluded, Elena's impact was evident in both performance quality and seriousness with which participants approached exercises. Her presence transformed routine fitness test into masterclass in military values and personal resilience. Mutual respect developing between Elena and participants represented bonds military service was designed to create, based on shared commitment to excellence and mutual support. Elena's final lesson: heroes weren't people who never failed, but people who failed forward, encapsulated wisdom from having faced ultimate military service test and emerging unbroken. Her heroism definition as willingness to continue trying despite imperfection offered standards both aspirational and achievable, maintaining military excellence requirements while avoiding paralysis from impossible expectations. When Elena gathered equipment to leave, transformation in perception was complete. She was no longer struggling civilian who failed basic fitness test, but living example of everything military service represented at highest level. Donovan's invitation to return next week was extended with genuine respect, recognizing her presence elevated training experience for everyone involved. Elena's story impact extended beyond immediate participants, as each person carried lessons about courage, perseverance, and true military service meaning that would influence their development. Young Marines like Kyle gained deeper understanding of combat service demands. Experienced personnel like Jake found their perspectives enriched by exposure to someone demonstrating these values under extreme circumstances. As Elena Kavak walked out of Camp Pendleton Gymnasium at 7:30 a.m. that October morning, she left behind more than workout sweat and exhaustion. Lessons she'd shared about resilience, determination, and heroism's true nature would continue influencing young Marines who'd witnessed her struggle and heard her story. Her example demonstrated being a hero wasn't about perfect performance, but willingness to continue serving despite limitation and constraint. Elena's 19 push-ups didn't define her character. Her response to falling short revealed everything about who she was and what she represented. Her story became part of informal oral tradition, passing wisdom from one Marine generation to another, reminding that heroes could be found in unexpected places, and profound military service lessons often came from lived experience of those who'd faced ultimate tests with honor and humanity intact. The silence that followed Elena's revelation was so complete and profound that individual heartbeats seemed audible in the stillness, the normal sounds of a busy military facility seeming to fade into nothingness as everyone present struggled to process the implications of what they were seeing and what it meant about everything they had assumed and believed about the woman they had been mocking and dismissing just moments before. Staff Sergeant Donovan's face underwent a series of rapid transformations as his mind worked through the implications. Initial confusion as he tried to understand what he was looking at, growing recognition as the significance of the tattoo became clear, shocked disbelief as he realized what Elena's presence in his gymnasium actually meant, and finally a kind of horrified understanding of what he had spent the better part of an hour doing to someone who had earned the right to wear that particular symbol of extraordinary heroism and sacrifice. Kyle Martinez found himself swallowing hard, his eyes fixed on the tattoo, as if he could not quite process or accept what he was seeing, his young mind struggling to reconcile the image of the struggling, failing civilian he had been mocking with the reality of someone who had achieved the highest recognition that American military service could bestow. Jake Williams' face had gone completely pale, all color draining away as the full implications of Elena's tattoo became clear to him, and he began to understand the magnitude of the mistake they had all made in their assessment of her capabilities, qualifications, and right to be present in their training environment. The Congressional Medal of Honor was not simply another military decoration among the many ribbons, badges, and commendations that military personnel could earn throughout their careers. It was the absolute pinnacle of military recognition, reserved exclusively for those individuals who had demonstrated extraordinary heroism in combat situations where the risk of death was not just present, but highly probable, where the actions taken went so far beyond the normal call of duty that they bordered on the superhuman, where the courage displayed and sacrifices made were so exceptional that they served as inspiration and example for all future generations of military personnel who would study these actions and strive to live up to the standards they represented. In the entire history of American military service, spanning more than 2 centuries of warfare and sacrifice, fewer than 3,500 individuals had received the Medal of Honor, making it one of the rarest and most prestigious awards in the world, more exclusive than any civilian honor or recognition, more difficult to achieve than any academic or professional accomplishment. Among those recipients, fewer than a dozen had been women, making Elena's achievement not just extraordinary in military terms, but historically significant in ways that most people could barely comprehend, placing her among a group of individuals whose actions had literally changed the course of military history and redefined what was possible for women in combat roles. Elena lowered her sweatshirt with the same deliberate care and control she had used to raise it, smoothing the fabric back into its normal position and adjusting her sleeves with movements that suggested she had revealed far more about herself than she had initially intended when Kyle had asked his innocent question about her tattoo. Her facial expression remained outwardly calm and composed, but there was something different in her eyes now that had not been present before the revelation, a hardness and intensity that spoke to experiences and memories that none of the watching Marines could even begin to imagine or understand. The kind of 1,000-yard stare that was familiar to anyone who had spent time around combat veterans who had seen and done things that fundamentally changed their relationship with the world. When Elena spoke again, asking quietly and politely whether they could proceed with the sit-up portion of the fitness test that had been interrupted by the extended discussion of her push-up performance, her voice carried a different weight and authority than it had possessed before her revelation. This was no longer the voice of someone seeking permission or approval from those around her, but the voice of someone who was accustomed to command and leadership, someone who was simply observing proper military protocol by acknowledging the authority structure of the situation while making it clear that she expected to be treated with the respect and recognition that her achievements had earned. The transformation in the gymnasium's atmosphere was immediate, profound, and irreversible, as if the very air had changed its composition and weight in response to Elena's revelation. Where there had been mockery, condescension, and casual dismissal just moments before, there was now a heavy silence filled with respect, curiosity, genuine fear, and more than a little shame at what had just transpired. Medal of Honor recipients were living legends in military culture, individuals whose actions in combat had been so extraordinary that they were studied in military academies around the world, held up as examples of the ultimate expression of military values and warrior spirit, and revered by fellow service members who understood the magnitude of what such recognition represented. Elena's military background began to emerge in carefully measured fragments as the shocked observers processed the implications of what they had learned and began to ask tentative, respectful questions about her service history and the circumstances that had led to her receiving the Medal of Honor. She identified herself as a former captain in the United States Army, a member of the elite Rangers Regiment that specialized in special operations, direct action missions, and the most dangerous and challenging assignments that the military had to offer, her officer rank indicating not just leadership responsibilities, but the kind of advanced training and proven competence that separated the exceptional from the merely capable in military hierarchies. Her current retired status provided a logical explanation for her civilian appearance and her presence in a general military fitness program rather than an active duty training facility. But these basic biographical facts only served to deepen the mystery and intrigue surrounding what exactly she had done in Afghanistan on March 15, 2019, to earn the Medal of Honor, and why someone with her background and achievements was struggling with basic push-up requirements in a military gymnasium. The story that Elena began to tell, initially in response to direct questions from her now respectful audience, but gradually becoming more detailed and comprehensive as she recognized the genuine interest and respect of those listening, painted a vivid and terrifying picture of modern warfare that was both inspiring in its demonstration of human courage and horrifying in its implications for what military service could demand from those who answered their nation's call to serve in hostile and dangerous environments. Forward Operating Base Chapman in Afghanistan had been the site of a carefully planned and expertly executed Taliban assault on March 15, 2019, an attack that had been coordinated over a period of weeks and launched with a level of precision, timing, and firepower that had caught the American forces stationed there completely off guard and unprepared for the scale and intensity of what they were facing. The initial phase of the assault had begun at precisely 3:30 a.m. with a concentrated barrage of mortar fire that had been carefully targeted to destroy critical communications equipment, block the primary escape routes from the base, and create maximum confusion and disorientation among the defending forces during the crucial first minutes when effective response and coordination were most critical for survival and mission success. Within the first 30 minutes of the attack, 22 American service members had found themselves trapped in the main compound building, cut off from reinforcement and facing a well-armed enemy force that had positioned itself to prevent any possibility of escape or rescue. The command structure had collapsed as senior officers were either killed or wounded in the initial assault, leaving the trapped soldiers without leadership and with rapidly diminishing ammunition and medical supplies. Intelligence estimates later determined that the attacking force consisted of approximately 43 Taliban fighters, armed with small arms, rocket-propelled grenades, and crew-served weapons that gave them overwhelming firepower advantages over the trapped Americans. Elena's position during the initial assault had been at an observation post located roughly 300 meters from the main compound, a location that had been chosen specifically because it provided excellent visibility over the surrounding area while remaining concealed from casual observation. The positioning that had made her post valuable for intelligence gathering had also made it invisible to the attacking Taliban forces, who had focused their initial assault on the primary buildings and defensive positions. This stroke of fortune had left Elena with a terrible choice. She could remain in her concealed position and wait for reinforcements that intelligence estimates suggested would not arrive for at least 4 hours, or she could abandon the safety of her position and attempt to reach the trapped soldiers in a rescue mission that would be tactically suicidal. The decision Elena made in that moment would later be dissected by military strategists and used as a case study in military academies around the world. Rather than wait for reinforcements that might arrive too late to help the trapped soldiers, she made the conscious choice to leave her secure position and single-handedly assault a numerically superior enemy force that had established defensive positions and overlapping fields of fire. Armed with only her standard M4 carbine rifle, 6 magazines of ammunition, 2 fragmentation grenades, and a basic first aid kit, Elena began what would become a 13-hour continuous combat operation that would result in the deaths of 37 enemy fighters and the successful rescue of all 22 trapped American soldiers. The medical consequences of Elena's heroic actions were severe and long-lasting, requiring multiple surgeries to address internal bleeding and infection complications that developed during her initial treatment. The 8 months of physical therapy that followed her medical stabilization had been focused not just on recovering from her specific injuries, but on rebuilding the fundamental physical capabilities that had been damaged by the trauma she had sustained. Permanent nerve damage in her left arm had reduced her grip strength and fine motor control, while reduced lung capacity from internal injuries had affected her cardiovascular endurance. Chronic pain in her leg from shrapnel wounds was a constant reminder of the price she had paid for her service to her fellow soldiers. Elena's current presence in a civilian fitness program was not the result of choice, but of medical necessity, as her doctors had determined that her military career was over due to the permanent limitations imposed by her combat injuries. The physical therapy that had brought her to Camp Pendleton was part of an ongoing effort to regain as much function as possible, with the modest goal of achieving 30 push-ups by Christmas, representing a significant challenge given her current capabilities. For someone who had once been capable of the extraordinary physical feats required of Army Rangers, the struggle to complete basic exercises was both humbling and frustrating, but it was also a continuation of the same determination that had driven her to risk everything for her fellow soldiers. The revelation of Elena's background created a profound shift in the dynamics of the gymnasium, as the Marines who had been mocking her performance just minutes earlier came to understand that they were in the presence of someone whose courage and sacrifice had literally become the stuff of legend. Staff Sergeant Donovan's embarrassment at his earlier comments was evident in his repeated attempts to apologize, but Elena's response demonstrated the same grace under pressure that had characterized her combat performance. She insisted that no apology was necessary, that Donovan had been doing his job in maintaining standards, and that the Medal of Honor did not excuse her failure to meet the fitness test requirements. This response revealed something fundamental about Elena's character that went beyond her combat heroics to touch on the values that truly defined military service. Her insistence that standards were standards, regardless of circumstances or past achievements, demonstrated an integrity that was both inspiring and humbling to the watching Marines. She acknowledged that her 19 push-ups represented her current physical limitations, while also making clear that those limitations did not define her worth as a person or diminish the significance of what she had accomplished in Afghanistan. The impromptu training session that developed as Elena shared her experience with the group provided insights into both combat tactics and the psychological preparation required for military service that went far beyond anything typically covered in standard fitness programs. Her emphasis on mental toughness as a skill that could be developed through graduated exposure to stress provided practical guidance for young Marines who would inevitably face their own tests under fire. The techniques she described for maintaining focus during extended combat operations, including the use of gratitude as a tool for mental clarity, offered perspectives on warrior psychology that were both accessible and immediately applicable. Elena's discussion of the relationship between failure and character development resonated particularly strongly with her audience because it addressed one of the fundamental challenges that all military personnel faced: how to maintain confidence and effectiveness in the face of setbacks or limitations. Her framework of viewing failure as data rather than judgment provided a practical approach to self-improvement that avoided the destructive cycle of self-criticism that could undermine performance. The example of her own fitness journey, from being unable to complete a single push-up during early recovery to her current level of 19 repetitions, illustrated the power of consistent effort over time, even when progress was slow and incremental. As the extended training session drew to a close, Elena's impact on the group was evident in both the quality of their performance and the seriousness with which they approached each exercise. Her presence had transformed what had begun as a routine fitness test into a masterclass in military values and personal resilience. The mutual respect that had developed between Elena and the other participants represented the kind of bonds that military service was designed to create, based not on rank or position, but on shared commitment to excellence and mutual support in the face of challenges. Elena's final lesson, that heroes were not people who never failed, but people who failed forward, encapsulated the wisdom that came from having faced the ultimate test of military service and emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. Her definition of heroism as the willingness to continue trying despite imperfection offered a standard that was both aspirational and achievable, avoiding the paralysis that could come from setting impossible expectations while maintaining the high standards that military excellence required. When Elena finally gathered her equipment and prepared to leave the gymnasium, the transformation in how she was perceived by everyone present was complete and irreversible. She was no longer the struggling civilian who had failed a basic fitness test, but a living example of everything that military service represented at its highest level. Staff Sergeant Donovan's invitation for her to return the following week was extended with genuine respect and anticipation, recognizing that her presence elevated the training experience for everyone involved. As Elena Kavak walked out of the Camp Pendleton Gymnasium at 7:30 a.m. that October morning, she left behind more than just the sweat and exhaustion of a challenging workout. The lessons she had shared about resilience, determination, and the true nature of heroism would continue to influence the young Marines who had witnessed her struggle and heard her story. Her example demonstrated that being a hero was not about perfect performance or freedom from limitation, but about the willingness to continue serving and striving despite imperfection and constraint. Elena's 19 push-ups did not define her character, but her response to falling short of the standard revealed everything about who she was and what she represented. Her legacy was not measured in push-ups completed or standards met, but in the inspiration she provided to others to continue serving and striving, regardless of the obstacles they might face or the limitations they might carry. Now, I ask you, have you ever met someone like Elena? Someone who carried more than they said and left something behind without asking for recognition? Share their story in the comments. And if this story touched you, subscribe to Real Hero Stories YouTube.